So we have a new movie out by Carol Morley. Carol Morley, as you know, directed The Falling, which I absolutely loved. And before that, she made a series of really interesting short films and then a kind of laceratingly confessional documentary called The Alcohol Years, all of which I think have recently been made available on BFI sites, whatever. So they are interesting to watch. So along comes Out of Blue, which is a radical adaptation of a novel by Martin Amis from 1997 that was originally earmarked to be directed by Nicholas Roeg. The film is produced by Luke Roeg, Nicholas Roeg's son. And what Carol Morley has done is to take the book, and she described in her own words, she said that what she was trying to do was to rescue the characters from the pages of the book, to kind of radically reinterpret the characters who she liked and make something different. So the story is nominally a murder investigation story, the investigation of the murder of an astrophysicist by a detective who has amnesia about her childhood. The detective, Mike Hoolihan, is played by Patricia Clarkson, who is looking outward for clues. She arrives at the scene of the crime. She's investigating, she's talking to people who knew the deceased, she's trying to find out how all this stuff happened. And as she investigates, because of the nature of the investigation, because the person who has been murdered is an astrophysicist, she starts speaking to people who start talking to her about parallel universes, about Schrodinger's cat, the alive and dead at the same time, about the way in which stars and stardust actually echo throughout the universe, and how we are all, in the end, parts of stardust. The thing begins with, the cataclysmic death of a star actually gives life to something else, because we're all part of this matter that filters through you. So what begins as a fairly straightforward, in inverted commas, investigation of a crime scene becomes something altogether more cosmic, more existential, and starts to become a story about dual realities and about parallel worlds, but all the time grounded in a kind of down-to-earth, sort of hard-boiled noir investigation. I'm going to play you a clip, but I have to say that one of the things about Out of Blue is it's a film which is a film. It is a very visual film, and the clip perhaps doesn't encapsulate much about the film itself, but here's a little bit of it.
Tony, did you know that your nose could come from a different star than your hand? And that we're all here because a star died?
Ain't it against God to believe that?
It's not a belief. It's fact.
I don't buy it.
I thought you believed you were a bit of a star. Silvero. 70s star. Ow.
You're one to talk, Joan Jett.
So you see, I mean, that, as I said, that clip kind of out of context perhaps doesn't best encapsulate the film. Anyway, so
it sounded quite out there.
Yes, it is, in terms of the discussion of, all the stuff that's going on. So anyway, here's the thing. I've seen the film a few times now, and I saw it most recently at a screening it was like a screening at Cambridge, which they had a Q&A afterwards with Carol Morley. And I'm a huge fan of Carol Morley's films. I think she's a born filmmaker. I think she's somebody who really understands the medium. For one thing, she has an immense love of and affection for the history of cinema. And when The Falling came out, one of the things that she did was, I think it was in a newspaper, and I genuinely can't remember which one it was, but it was kind of like an influences board. Like, these are the films that I think, perhaps influenced it. And it was this incredible kind of scattershot, like exploding star of influences. And then I saw the film, and I saw a whole bunch of influences that I think were nothing to do with anything that she intended. But, she said, well, that's okay, it's fine, because, all these movies are kind of interconnected in the same ways the cosmology of the film itself is. I loved Out of Blue. And the thing that I loved most about it is every time you see it, you see more in it. There's a line in the film which is, you can tell a lot by looking. And the film is almost like a kind of mesmerizing spell. The more you look at it, the more you see in it. So at the beginning, one of the things is made clear is that the film is about dualities. It's about these two characters. One of them's dead, one of them's alive. One of them is an astrophysicist who believes that all the world is kind of, connected through stardust. Another is somebody who has repressed memories of their childhood and only really thinks that their life has existed within the world of homicide detection. There are two colours which come to represent them, red and blue. And throughout the design of the film, there is this kind of chromatic battle between red and blue. And once you start noticing it, you start noticing it in every single frame. You know, a red sash, a blue bead, the red interiors of a car, the grey blue of a police station. And the whole film almost starts to tremble with this reverberation. You heard a little bit in that clip of Clint Mansell's score, and Clint Mansell, I think, is just a brilliant composer. I really love his music. And what his score does, on the one hand, is it's kind of strange, atmospheric, moody, ambient, but it also has this kind of splashy jazz thing going on underneath it. And a lot of the way in which Out of Blue is put together reminded me of the editing of Frank Mazzola, who had worked with Donald Cammell, who, of course, was a colleague of Nick Rogue's way back. And he described the way that he edited a film as being kind of like jazz rhythms knitting together. And as you start to watch the film, the first time I saw it, I thought, okay, I can see it as being a sort of fairly straightforward murder mystery with all this cosmic stuff going on in the background. The second time I saw it, it seemed to me that all that cosmic stuff was really, really up in the foreground, and that's much more what the film was about. I mean, the film begins in outer space with this sequence which is like the beginning of A Matter of Life and Death, which is one of my favourite films of all time, the Powell and Pressburger movie. And then you start to see, you know, when I was talking about Us, and I said the interesting thing about Us is that there are these resonances all the way through, these dualities. The thing about Jeremiah 11:11, which you then see on the clock, and then you then see on the ambulance at the very end, which I hadn't noticed before. And in terms of Out of Blue, every time I've seen it, I have been more amazed by the depth of what's going on, particularly since the film was shot in 28 days, which is a tiny schedule. I mean, films shoot for months, sometimes for years, 28 days from beginning to end. It's set in New Orleans, which is described at one point as the city that care forgot, and then somebody else says it's the city that forgot. So it's also a film about memory, and film for me is so much about memory and about the way in which memory works. And at the centre of it, you have this brilliant detective character who is terrifically played, I think, by Patricia Clarkson, as someone who is down to earth, feet on the ground, hard-boiled, nuts and bolts. Very early on, we hear nothing ever affects her, but something about this case has got under her skin. And it becomes a film about unravelling the secrets of the universe whilst investigating this murder mystery. And I know that it's not for everybody, and I know that some people will see it and bridle at the kind of, you know, the ragged edges of the filmmaking and maybe find it pretentious or maybe just, you know, not be. But I loved it. I was so enraptured by it. And each time I think about it, I just think I want to go back and see it again, because I just thought it was cinema. It was what film should be about. It's adventure, and it's aiming so high. You know, it's that you aim for the stars. Sometimes you hit the ground, but you've got to love the trajectory of somebody aiming that high. It's called Out of Blue, not Out of the Blue, Out of Blue, because it's blue and red are at the key to it. And I wish everybody would go and see it. And I thought it was great.
It's going to be quite close between that and Dumbo for Movie of the Week, and who knows what's going to come in the next 41 minutes.